The morning my daughter tore my name off the mailbox, she did it slowly, like she wanted the whole street to see. I stood on the porch in my slippers, one hand on the railing, the other gripping my purse. Emily didn't even look ashamed. She ripped the little brass plate that said Grace Bennett from the black metal box and handed her husband a new one that read The Carters. Then she looked up at me and said, "Mom, it's time this house belonged to people who can actually use it." I said nothing, because inside my purse was the deed she had never seen. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe if stories like this touch your heart. And I'd truly love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what you would have done if your own child tried to erase your name while you were still standing there. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Sometimes knowing someone is listening from another place makes a painful story feel a little less lonely. Before that morning at the mailbox, before my daughter's fingers curled around my name like it was something dirty that needed to be removed, my house had always felt like the safest place in the world. It was not a mansion. It was not one of those glossy homes people show off in magazines with marble counters and staircases wide enough for wedding photos. It was a modest 2-story house on a quiet street in Dayton, Ohio, with white siding that needed washing every spring, a narrow front porch, and a maple tree in the yard that turned the color of fire every October. But to me, it was everything. My husband Robert and I bought that house when we were still young enough to believe hard work could fix almost anything. He was a maintenance supervisor for the city, and I worked as a secretary at an elementary school. We did not have money to waste. We clipped coupons, packed lunches, drove used cars, and saved every extra dollar in an old coffee can before we ever trusted a bank account to hold our dreams. I still remembered the day we signed the papers. Robert squeezed my hand under the table so hard I almost laughed out loud. His palm was rough from work, but it trembled when the realtor slid the keys toward us. "Well, Gracie," he whispered once we stepped outside, "we've got walls now." I asked him what he meant. He looked at the house, then back at me with that soft grin I missed every day. Walls to protect what matters. For 41 years, those walls did exactly that. They held the sound of our daughter Emily's first steps across the living room carpet. They held birthday candles, Christmas mornings, school projects spread across the dining table, and Sunday roasts that made the windows fog in winter. They held arguments too, of course. No family lives together without raised voices now and then. But even after the hard days, the house had a way of pulling us back into peace. The kitchen was my favorite room. Robert had put in the oak cabinets himself one summer when money was too tight to hire anybody. They were not perfect. One door never closed quite right, and the drawer beside the stove always stuck when the weather turned humid. But every time I ran my hand over those cabinets, I could still see him standing there in an old gray t-shirt, pencil behind his ear, telling me not to worry because crooked wood still holds plates. After Robert passed, that kitchen became both my comfort and my wound. Some mornings, I would make coffee and pour 2 cups by habit. His mug, the navy blue one with the chipped handle, stayed in the cabinet beside mine. I told myself keeping it there was foolish, but I could not move it. At my age, you learn that grief is not always loud. Sometimes it is just an extra mug you cannot throw away. Emily never understood that. My daughter had always been different from me. Brighter, sharper, more polished. She liked nice restaurants, clean white furniture, and neighborhoods where people paid someone else to rake their leaves. I was proud of her ambition when she was young. I used to tell Robert, "That girl is going to walk into rooms we never even dreamed of." And she did, for a while. She married Kevin Carter, a man with a smooth voice and expensive shoes. He worked in real estate financing, or at least that was how he explained it. I never fully understood what he did, only that he always seemed to be talking about opportunities, investments, leverage, and timing. He called me Mrs. Bennett for the first 5 years, even after I told him he could call me Grace. I thought that was respect. Later, I wondered if it had only been distance. After Robert died, Emily's visits became more frequent. At first, I was grateful. Losing a husband after more than 4 decades leaves a silence that feels physical. The rooms seemed larger without him. The evenings stretched too long. So when Emily started stopping by with takeout containers and store-bought flowers, I let myself believe grief had softened something between us. She would sit at my kitchen table, scrolling through her phone while I warmed plates. "You shouldn't be alone so much, Mom," she would say. And my heart, old and hungry for my child's affection, would answer before my mind could question it. I would think, maybe she needs me again. Maybe we can be close now. But little by little, her concern began to sound less like love and more like inspection. She would open cabinets and sigh. "These are outdated." She would look at the carpet in the hallway. "This really needs to be replaced." She would stand in the living room with her arms crossed, studying the walls as if calculating how much of my life needed to be removed before the house became acceptable. At first, I brushed it off. Younger people always think older homes need fixing. They see age as damage. They do not understand that sometimes a worn banister is not a flaw. Sometimes it is proof that children ran their hands along it, that a husband carried laundry upstairs, that a woman held tight to it after a funeral because her knees almost gave out. Then Emily began asking questions. Not all at once. That would have worn me too quickly. She was careful in the beginning. One afternoon, while I folded towels in the laundry room, she leaned against the doorway and asked, "Mom, is the house paid off completely?" I looked up. "Yes, paid off completely." I looked up. "Yes, your father made the last payment 7 years before he passed. He was so proud he took me to dinner at Olive Garden like we'd won the lottery." She smiled, but it did not react her eyes. "That's good. Really good. Your father made the last payment 7 years before he passed. He was so proud he took me to dinner at Olive Garden like we'd won the lottery." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "That's good. Really good." Another time she asked where I kept the homeowner's insurance paperwork. Why, I asked. She gave a little laugh. "Mom, I'm just trying to help you stay organized. You're alone now. Someone should know where things are." Someone. That word stayed with me, though I could not have said why. A few weeks later, Kevin came with her. He walked through the house slowly, hands in his pockets, glancing at the ceiling, the windows, the basement door. He complimented the bones of the place, which sounded nice, until he said it the way contractors say it before tearing everything else apart. "This neighborhood has gone up," he told me while Emily stood beside him. "You'd be surprised what this property is worth now." "I'm not planning to sell," I said. "No, of course not," he replied quickly. Too quickly. "I just mean it's good to know your assets." My assets, not my home, not my memories, not the place Robert had planted roses under the front window because he said a house should greet its wife properly. Assets. Emily must have seen my face tighten because she touched my shoulder. "Don't be sensitive, Mom. Kevin deals with this stuff all day. He's only trying to help." That became their favorite phrase. Only trying to help. When Emily asked about property taxes, she was only trying to help. When she wanted to know whether my will had been updated after Robert's death, she was only trying to help. When Kevin asked if my deed was in a safe deposit box or somewhere in the house, he was only trying to help. I told myself not to be suspicious of my own child. A mother does not want to believe her daughter is measuring the curtains while she is still breathing behind them. So I kept making excuses. Emily was stressed. Kevin was busy. Their daughter Ava was preparing for college soon. Money was tight for everyone. Maybe they were just worried about me. Maybe I was becoming one of those older women who mistook concern for control because loneliness had made her prickly. Then one Sunday, Emily came over without calling first. I was in the backyard, kneeling carefully beside Robert's rose bushes, pulling weeds from the damp soil. My knees ached, and my gardening gloves had a hole in one finger, but the roses were blooming, and that made me feel close to him. Emily stepped onto the patio in designer sunglasses and said, "Mom, we need to talk." Those 5 words have a way of changing the air. I stood slowly brushing dirt from my jeans. "Is everything all right?" She looked toward the house instead of at me. "Our place is having some problems." "What kind of problems?" "Repairs," she said. "Water damage mostly. The contractor says it could take a few weeks." I waited. She removed her sunglasses and gave me the kind of smile she used when she wanted something, but did not want to call it asking. Kevin and I were thinking it might make sense for us to stay here for a little while, just until things are settled. For a moment, I felt something warm open in my chest. My daughter needed me. My granddaughter would be under my roof again. The rooms would not be so quiet. "How long is a little while?" I asked. Emily waved her hand as if time were a tiny detail. 3 weeks, maybe 4. "Well, help around the house. It could be good for you, honestly." Good for me. I should have noticed how she said it. Not good to be together, not good for the family. Good for me, as if she were already doing me a favor by moving into the house I owned. But I was a mother before I was a suspicious woman. So I said yes. I said yes because I remembered Emily at 6 years old, afraid of thunderstorms, crawling into my bed with cold feet. I said yes because I remembered Robert telling me, no matter how grown they get, children still need somewhere to come home to. I said yes because Ava hugged me that evening and whispered, "Thanks, Grandma," in a voice that sounded more relieved than excited. And I said yes because I did not yet understand that some people do not come home looking for shelter. Some come looking for keys. That night, after Emily left to pack a few things, I walked through the house, turning on lamps. The living room glowed gold. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish. Robert's picture sat on the mantel, smiling in his navy suit from our 40th anniversary. "They're coming for a few weeks," I told him softly. The house creaked around me, settling the way old houses do. For the first time in years, I thought maybe the silence was ending. I did not know it was only making room for something worse. They arrived the following Saturday with more boxes than anyone brings for a few weeks. That was the first thing I noticed. Emily had told me they only needed a temporary place to stay while repairs were being done at their house. I expected a few suitcases, maybe some laundry baskets, Ava's school bag, Kevin's laptop. But by 10 in the morning, their SUV was backed into my driveway. Kevin had rented a small moving trailer, and cardboard boxes were stacked on my porch like they belonged there. I stood in the doorway holding a dish towel. I had not realized I was twisting between my hands. "Emily," I said carefully, "I thought this was just for a little while." She climbed out of the passenger seat, wearing leggings, a cream sweater, and the irritated expression of someone already tired of being questioned. "It is, Mom," she said. "But we can't live out of overnight bags. We have a teenager, remember Ava got out of the back seat then." She gave me a small smile, the kind that asked for forgiveness before anyone had done anything out loud. "Hi, Grandma." I opened my arms, and she came into them stiffly at first, then melted a little. She smelled like shampoo and the vanilla lotion I used to buy her when she was little. For one moment, holding her made everything feel right. I told myself I was being silly about the boxes. Families bring things. People need clothes. Teenagers need half their bedrooms to feel normal. Then Kevin came around the trailer carrying a plastic storage bin labeled "Office." "Morning, Grace," he said. Not Mrs. Bennett anymore. Not even Mom like Emily sometimes told him he could say. Just Grace, as if we had become business partners. "Good morning, Kevin." He looked past me into the house. Well, try not to disrupt your routine too much. That should have comforted me. Instead, I noticed the word try. By noon, my quiet house no longer sounded like mine. Boxes scraped across the hardwood. The front door opened and closed over and over. Kevin carried things directly to the basement without asking where they should go. Emily started directing traffic like she had lived there for years. Put those in the dining room. No, not there, Kevin. That wall gets better light. Ava, take your things upstairs. Grandma cleared your old room. I had cleared the guest room, not Ava's old room. Ava had never lived with me, but she used to spend weekends there when she was younger. It had a twin bed, a quilt I sewed myself, and shelves with children's books she had outgrown, but I could never bring myself to donate. Emily walked into that room and looked around with a sigh. Mom, why do you still have all this baby stuff? They're memories, I said. They're clutter. She said it casually, but the word landed hard. Clutter. That afternoon, while Kevin unloaded the last boxes, Emily began rearranging my living room. I had gone into the kitchen to make sandwiches because that is what I do when people are working in my home. Feeding people has always been my first language. I sliced tomatoes, laid out ham and cheese, and put a pitcher of iced tea on the counter. But when I came back into the living room, my blue armchair was being dragged away from the window. Careful, I said. That chair leg catches on the rug. Emily did not stop. This room doesn't flow, Mom. It flows fine for me. She gave me a quick smile, the kind people give older women when they want to make disagreement sound like affection. I know, but you've had it the same way forever. Change is healthy. That chair had been Robert's chair first. After his knees got bad, he liked sitting by the window where he could watch the birds at the feeder. After he died, I began sitting there in the evenings because it made me feel close to him. I did not say that. Some grief is too sacred to explain to someone who has already decided it is clutter. Kevin came in carrying a lamp. Actually, if you move this sofa to the opposite wall, the room looks bigger. Emily snapped her fingers. Exactly within an hour, the room I knew by heart had been turned into a place where I had to pause before sitting down. The next morning, I found Robert's picture missing from the mantel. I had just poured my coffee when I looked up and saw the empty space. For a second, my mind could not understand what my eyes were seeing. His framed photograph had sat there for 9 years. Navy suit, silver tie, that half smile that always made him look like he knew something gentle about the world. I set my mug down so hard, coffee splashed onto the counter. Emily. She was in the hallway with a measuring tape. Did you move your father's picture? She glanced over her shoulder. I put it in the den. The den. Mom. The living room felt like a shrine. I stared at her. She softened her voice, but not her meaning. You need to stop living in the past. I wanted to tell her that the past had built the roof over her head. I wanted to tell her that every inch of that house had been paid for by the hands of a man she was now treating like outdated decor. But the words crowded my throat and would not come out. Instead, I walked to the den. Robert's picture was on a side table beside a stack of old magazines. Face turned slightly toward the wall. I picked it up with both hands, wiped a speck of dust from the glass, and whispered, I'm sorry. That was the first time Ava caught me crying. She stood in the doorway wearing an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, Grandma, Mom shouldn't have moved that. I tried to smile. It's all right, sweetheart. No, she said, it isn't. Her voice trembled, not with anger exactly, with fear. Before I could ask what she meant, Emily called from upstairs. Ava, come help me with these boxes. Ava lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. Then she turned and left. Those 2 words stayed with me for the rest of the day. I'm sorry. Not sorry about the picture. Not only that, sorry for something bigger. Over the next week, small changes gathered like storm clouds. Emily replaced my kitchen curtains without asking. She said the yellow ones made the room look tired. I had sewn those curtains myself the summer Robert retired. When I told her that, she kissed my cheek and said, "That's sweet, Mom, but sweet isn't always stylish." Kevin spent more time in the basement than anyone needed to. I heard him opening storage cabinets, moving paint cans, testing the old utility sink, tapping on beams. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Just checking the foundation." Why? He smiled. Old houses can hide expensive surprises. I did not like the way he said expensive. One evening, I found him in the garage looking through a metal file cabinet where Robert had kept manuals, warranties, and old tax receipts. "Kevin," I said, sharper than I intended. "What are you looking for?" He straightened quickly, holding a folder in one hand. "Emily asked me to see if you had the roof paperwork. If we're all staying here, it's good to know what shape things are in." "All staying here?" I repeated. He put the folder back, but not before I saw that it was not roof paperwork. It was labeled insurance. He closed the drawer. "You know what I mean?" But I did not know what he meant. Or perhaps I did, and that frightened me more. That night, I checked the hallway drawer where I kept my spare house keys. One was missing. When I asked Emily, she did not even look embarrassed. "Oh, I gave it to Kevin," she said. "He needs to come and go. He could have asked me." Emily sighed. "Mom, don't make everything formal. We're family. We're family." Those 2 words became a key that opened every door I was not ready to guard. A few days later, a locksmith's sticker appeared on the side door near the driveway. I noticed it when I came back from the grocery store. The lock looked new or shinier. My stomach tightened. Emily. A few days later, a locksmith's sticker appeared on the side door near the driveway. I noticed it when I came back from the grocery store. The lock looked newer, shinier. My stomach tightened. Emily. She came from the kitchen holding a mug of tea. "Did someone change this lock?" "Not change, just reinforce," she said. "The old one was loose. I would have liked to know before work was done on my door." Her face hardened for just a second. Then she smiled. "Mom, we're trying to make this place safer for you." There it was again. For you. As if my discomfort was ingratitude. As if my boundaries were symptoms of age. As if ownership became rude the moment a mother reminded her child whose name was on the house. That evening, after everyone went upstairs, I sat alone in Robert's chair, now pushed into a corner where the lamplight barely reached. I listened to the unfamiliar sounds of my own home. Kevin's footsteps above me, Emily opening and closing drawers, Ava's muffled voice behind the guest room door. I looked toward the mantel where Robert's picture had been returned, only because I quietly put it back. For the first time since my daughter moved in, I did not feel less lonely. I felt surrounded, and there is a difference. The next morning, Ava found me in the kitchen before sunrise. She stood by the refrigerator in her socks, arms wrapped around herself. "Grandma," and there is a difference. The next morning, Ava found me in the kitchen before sunrise. She stood by the refrigerator in her socks, arms wrapped around herself. "Grandma," she whispered, "can I tell you something?" I turned from the coffee maker. "Of course." She glanced toward the stairs. Then she stepped closer and said so softly I almost missed it, "Please don't sign anything Mom and Dad give you." My hands went cold. "What do you mean, honey?" But before Ava could answer, Kevin's voice came from the hallway. "You two are up early." Ava flinched. Kevin smiled at me, smooth and calm. but his eyes went straight to his daughter. "Everything okay?" Ava nodded too quickly. "Yeah, I was just getting water." Then she slipped past him and hurried upstairs. Kevin watched her go. Then he turned to me. "Teenagers," he said with a little laugh. "Always dramatic." I smiled back because I had learned long ago that sometimes a woman protects herself best by appearing harmless. But as I poured my coffee, I knew one thing with a clarity that made my heart beat slow and heavy. My daughter had not come home just needing shelter. Something else had moved into my house with her, and it was already looking for my signature. The morning my name disappeared from the mailbox began with a sound I did not recognize. It was not a knock, not the soft thump of the newspaper landing near the porch steps, not the low rumble of the garbage truck turning onto our street. It was sharper than that, metal scraping against metal. A stubborn, ugly sound that made my teeth clench before I even opened my eyes fully. I was standing at the kitchen counter in my robe, trying to steady my hands around a cup of coffee I had barely tasted. I had not slept much the night before. Ava's warning still sat inside me like a stone. "Please don't sign anything Mom and Dad give you." Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it again. I had wanted to ask her more, but Kevin's sudden appearance in the hallway had ended that conversation like a door slamming shut. Since then, Ava had avoided being alone with me. Not because she did not want to talk, I believed, but because she was scared of being caught. The scraping sound came again. This time, it was followed by a small crack. I set my coffee down. At first, I thought Kevin might be fixing something near the porch without telling me the way he had done with the side door lock. But something about that sound pulled me toward the front window. I moved quietly, parting the curtain with 2 fingers. And there she was. My daughter stood at the edge of the front yard in a pale blue blouse. Her hair pulled back neatly as if she were preparing for a meeting instead of a betrayal. Kevin stood beside her with a cordless drill in one hand and a small white package tucked under his arm. The black mailbox leaned at the curb, the same mailbox Robert had installed 20 years earlier after the old one rusted through. Emily had one hand gripping the little brass plate on the side, the plate that read Grace Bennett. For one foolish second, I thought she was cleaning it. Then she yanked. The metal bent, but it did not come loose. She looked irritated, as if my name itself were being difficult. Kevin said something I could not hear. Then he handed her a flathead screwdriver. My breath caught. I stepped back from the curtain, my heart beating so hard, I felt it in my throat. I knew I should go outside immediately. I knew I should open the door and demand to know what they were doing. But my body did not move right away. There are moments when pain arrives so strangely that your mind refuses to identify it. A daughter can yell at you. A daughter can disappoint you. A daughter can be selfish, thoughtless, even cruel. But watching your child physically remove your name from your own home is a different kind of wound. It is not an argument. It is an erasure. The scraping came again louder now. I walked to the hallway table and picked up my purse. That purse had been beside me all morning. A plain brown leather purse with a worn strap and a small ink stain inside the lining. Nothing about it looked important. Nothing about it announced that tucked inside between my checkbook and an envelope from the county recorder's office was a certified copy of the deed to my house. I had gotten it less than an hour earlier. I had not even told Emily I had left the house. Before anyone woke, I had called a cab and gone downtown to the Montgomery County Recorder's office. I told myself I was only being careful. I told myself an old woman had the right to hold proof in her hands when her own house began to feel uncertain beneath her feet. The clerk had been kind. She printed the certified copy, slid it across the counter, and said, You're the only owner listed here, Mrs. Bennett. The only owner. Those words had filled my chest with relief and grief at the same time. Robert's name had once been beside mine. After he died, the survivorship transfer left the house legally mine alone. I remembered Daniel Harris, our old lawyer, explaining it carefully years ago. But grief does strange things to memory, and fear does worse. So that morning, I needed to see it in black ink. Grace Ellen Bennett, owner. Not Emily Carter, not Kevin Carter, not the Carters, me. Now I stood in my hallway with that proof inside my purse while my daughter tried to pry my name off the mailbox like it was a loose nail. I opened the front door. The sound stopped. Emily turned around, but she did not look startled. That told me something. She had expected me to see. Across the street, Mrs. Louise Miller was standing near her flower bed with pruning shears in her hand, frozen in place. Louise had lived beside us for 30 years. She had brought casseroles after Robert's funeral, sat with me during snowstorms, and once held my hand through an entire ambulance ride when I slipped on the back steps. Her eyes moved from Emily to me, and I saw the question there. Grace, what is happening? I stepped onto the porch. The morning air was cool, but my face felt hot. Emily, I said, keeping my voice steady. What are you doing? She straightened as if I had interrupted her doing something ordinary. We're updating the mailbox. Updating it? Kevin looked down at the drill, then away. He had the decency to appear uncomfortable, though not enough decency to stop. Emily held up the bent brass plate between two fingers. My name dangled there, scratched and twisted. This was old, she said. My hand tightened around my purse strap. That is my name. She sighed, like I was making a scene over a broken lamp. Mom, please don't be dramatic. Louise took one step closer to the curb. Emily saw her and lifted her chin. That was when I realized my daughter was not embarrassed by having a witness. She wanted one. Maybe she thought public pressure would shrink me. Maybe she thought if she acted like the decision had already been made, I would be too humiliated to challenge it. Kevin opened the white package and removed a new plate, polished black letters on bright silver metal. The Carters. My knees almost weakened. Not Emily Carter. Not even Emily and Kevin Carter. The Carters, like a household replacing another household. Like my house had changed hands in silence while I was asleep upstairs. I looked at the plate, then at my daughter. This is still my home, I said. Emily's mouth tightened. For now, she said. The words were quiet, but they carried all the way across the yard. Louise's hand flew to her chest. Kevin murmured, Emily, but Emily was past caution now. Something hard and hungry had come into her face. It frightened me, not because it was unfamiliar, but because some small part of me recognized it from every conversation where she had smiled while asking about taxes insurance and where I kept important papers. Mom, she said louder now, you need to accept reality. This house is too much for you. You can barely keep up with it. Kevin and I are here. Ava is here, and honestly, it makes sense for this to become the family home. It has always been the family home. You know what I mean. No, I said. I do not think I do. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. Of course you don't. You want everything frozen exactly the way Dad left it. But Dad is gone, Mom. And the rest of us are still trying to live. That struck where she meant it to strike. For a moment, I could not speak, because the cruelest words are not always lies. Robert was gone. I did hold on to pieces of him. I did sometimes move through that house like the past might answer if I kept everything in its place. But grief did not make me incapable. Love did not make me foolish. And age did not make my name disposable. I looked down at the bent brass plate in Emily's hand. Robert had ordered that plate after he repainted the mailbox one summer. He had screwed it on himself, then stepped back with pride and said, "There, now even the mailman knows who keeps this place standing." My eyes burned, but I refused to cry in the yard. Not in front of Kevin, not in front of Louise, and especially not in front of my daughter, who had mistaken my softness for surrender. Emily handed my old nameplate to Kevin and took the new one. "Move aside, Mom," and especially not in front of my daughter, who had mistaken my softness for surrender. Emily handed my old nameplate to Kevin and took the new one. "Move aside, Mom," she said. "This needs to be done." "No," I said. She blinked, surprised by the firmness in my voice. Kevin cleared his throat. "Grace, maybe we should all talk inside." I looked at him then, really looked at him. The smooth expression, the careful tone, the way he stepped forward only when Emily had gone too far. Not because he disagreed, but because he wanted the damage managed. I wondered how many conversations had happened when I was not in the room. How many plans had been made over my kitchen table after I went to bed. How many times they had referred to my home as an asset, an opportunity, a solution. My purse felt heavy against my side. The deed was right there. I could have pulled it out in that moment. I could have walked down those porch steps, held it in front of Emily's face, and ended the performance before she screwed that hateful little plate into the mailbox. But something stopped me. Not fear. Clarity. If I showed my hand too soon, they would change tactics. They would apologize, soften, pretend it was all a misunderstanding. Kevin would explain. Emily would cry. They would hide whatever else they were planning before I could understand the full shape of it. So I stood still. I let silence stretch long enough for Louise to see it, for Kevin to feel it, for Emily to mistake it for weakness. Then I said, "I will remember this." Emily rolled her eyes, but her fingers trembled slightly as she held the new plate. I turned and went back inside before the tears came. The door closed behind me with a sound that seemed too small for what had just happened. Through the window, I watched Kevin attach the Carters to my mailbox. Each turn of the drill felt like it was going into my chest. But beneath my pain, something else had started to rise. Slow, cold, steady. I walked to the kitchen table, opened my purse, and took out the envelope from the county recorder's office. I laid it flat in front of me and pressed my palm against the paper. Grace Ellen Bennett, owner. My daughter had taken my name off the mailbox, but she had not taken it off the deed. And before that day was over, I promised myself one thing. She was going to learn the difference. I did not go to the county recorder's office that morning because I suddenly became brave. I went because the phone rang before sunrise. It was 6:42 a.m. I remember the exact time because I had been awake since 4, lying still beneath my quilt, listening to the house breathe around me. When you have lived alone for years, you learn every sound your house makes. You know which floorboard complains when the weather changes. You know how the refrigerator hums before it shuts off. You know the difference between the wind tapping a branch against the window and a person moving where they should not be. That morning, the house felt too quiet. Emily and Kevin had gone to bed late. I had heard their voices downstairs after midnight, low and tense, though I could not make out the words. Ava's warning kept circling in my mind like a bird trapped in a room. Please, don't sign anything Mom and Dad give you. By the time the phone rang, I was already sitting at the kitchen table in my robe, staring at Robert's empty chair. The number on the screen looked local, but not familiar. Normally, I do not answer unknown numbers that early. At my age, early phone calls usually mean bad news or scams. But something in me picked it up. Hello? Good morning. May I speak with Mrs. Grace Bennett? The woman's voice was polite, professional, and cautious. This is Grace. My name is Teresa. I'm calling from Buckeye Community Bank regarding a property verification request connected to your home on Maple Ridge Lane. I sat up straighter. My home? Yes, ma'am. I apologize for calling so early, but the request was flagged because the primary owner's verbal confirmation had not been received. I looked toward the hallway, though no one was there. I'm sorry, I said slowly. What request? There was a pause on the other end. Papers shifted. It appears there was an inquiry related to refinancing or using the property as collateral for a line of credit. Before anything can move forward, ownership and authorization have to be confirmed. My fingers tightened around the phone. I did not request any refinance. Another pause. This one was heavier. All right, Teresa said carefully. Then I'm glad I reached you directly. My mouth went dry. Who made the inquiry? I can't disclose all details over the phone without completing identity verification, she said, lowering her voice just a little. But I can tell you the request included a reference to a family member assisting you with financial management. For a moment, I could hear nothing but my own heartbeat. A family member, not a stranger, not some criminal in another state fishing for information. Someone close enough to know my address, my full name, perhaps even my late husband's name. Someone close enough to call it assistance. Mrs. Bennett, Teresa continued, have you recently given anyone power of attorney permission to manage your property or authorization to discuss your home equity? No, I said. Absolutely not. Have you signed any documents in the past few weeks? No. The answer came fast, but then Ava's face flashed in my mind, her pale, frightened expression in the kitchen. Kevin's voice cutting through the hallway. Don't sign anything. My stomach turned cold. Teresa explained that nothing had been approved. No loan had been opened, no transfer had occurred, but the fact that an inquiry existed at all made the floor beneath me feel unsteady. What should I do? I asked. Her voice softened. First, do not sign anything unless you have your own attorney review it. Second, confirm your deed with the county recorder. You may want a certified copy for your records, and if anyone pressures you, document it. Document it. That word sounded so official, so serious, so unlike family. I thanked her, hung up, and sat very still. The kitchen was pale with early morning light. The maple tree outside moved gently in the breeze. Upstairs, my daughter slept under my roof. My son-in-law slept under my roof. My granddaughter, scared and silent, slept under my roof. And someone had already reached toward the house on paper before ever facing me across the table. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe Kevin had only been asking questions. Maybe Emily had misunderstood something. Maybe he had mentioned possibilities and a bank employee had overreacted. Maybe my fear was turning shadows into monsters. But then I remembered the missing spare key. The changed side lock. Kevin in the garage file cabinet with the insurance folder in his hand. Emily asking where I kept the deed. And I knew. A mother's heart will defend her child long after the evidence has stopped doing so. I rose from the table and walked to the small desk in the den. My hands shook as I opened the drawer where I kept old address books, stamps, and Robert's fountain pen. Tucked beneath them was a business card that had been there for years. Daniel Harris, attorney at law. I almost called him then. My thumb hovered over the number. But it was still too early, and some part of me wanted to hold proof before I spoke to anyone. Proof that I was not confused. Proof that my memory was not failing. Proof that the house was still mine in a world where everyone around me had begun acting as if it were already theirs. So I got dressed quietly. I put on navy slacks, a gray cardigan, comfortable shoes, and the pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 35th anniversary. I do not know why I chose the earrings. Maybe because I needed to feel like his wife again, not like some helpless old woman being managed by people with clipboards and plans. I took my purse from the hallway chair, checked that my driver's license was inside, and called a cab instead of asking Emily for a ride. I left through the side door. The new lock clicked behind me with a sound I hated. Downtown Dayton was just waking up when the cab dropped me near the county building. Workers hurried along the sidewalk with coffee cups. A man in a delivery uniform held a door open for me, and I thanked him, though my voice hardly sounded like mine. Inside, the recorder's office smelled like paper toner and floor cleaner. There were fluorescent lights overhead and a long counter where people came to file pieces of their lives' births, deaths, marriages, land debts, promises. A young clerk with red glasses called me forward. "How can I help you today?" "I need a certified copy of the deed to my home," I said. She asked for my name and address. I gave both. She typed for a while, her nails clicking quickly on the keyboard. Waiting was worse than I expected. I knew the truth. Of course I knew. Robert and I had bought that house. We had paid that mortgage. I had signed more papers than I could count. But when your own daughter starts behaving like your ownership is an inconvenience, doubt can creep in through cracks you did not know you had. The clerk studied the screen, then printed several pages. "Here it is," she said. "Grace Ellen Bennett is listed as the current owner." I gripped the edge of the counter. "Only me?" She looked again. "Yes, ma'am. Only you." "And no one has been added recently?" "No, ma'am. No transfer. No lien. I don't know about." She shook her head. "Not according to this record. Would you like a certified copy?" "Yes," I said, and my voice nearly broke. "Please." While the document printed, I looked down at my hands. They were older than I remembered. Veins raised, knuckles slightly swollen. A small scar near my thumb from when I cut myself opening a can of peaches the year Emily turned 12. These hands had packed school lunches, washed feverish foreheads, sewn Halloween costumes, signed permission slips, held Emily when her first boyfriend broke her heart. These hands had helped build a life, and now I had to use them to prove that life belonged to me. The clerk stamped the paper, sealed it, and slid it across the counter. "There you go, Mrs. Bennett." Mrs. Bennett, not elderly occupant, not dependent mother, not future inheritance. Mrs. Bennett. I put the certified deed into my purse as if placing a sleeping child in a cradle. Then I sat on a bench outside the office for several minutes, breathing slowly. Relief did not come the way I expected. I thought I would feel safe once I saw my name. Instead, I felt the deeper fear of understanding. If someone had contacted a bank, then this was not just Emily being rude about furniture. It was not just Kevin being nosy. It was not just a daughter growing impatient with an aging mother. It was a plan. Maybe unfinished. Maybe not yet fully legal. Maybe still wrapped in family language and false concern. But a plan all the same. And plans, I had learned from Robert, do not begin with the final move. They begin with small tests. A question about insurance. A missing key. A new lock. A daughter saying, "This house is too much for you." A husband saying, "It's good to know your assets." By the time I got home, the sun was higher, and my street looked ordinary. Children's bikes lay in one driveway. Louise Miller watered her flowers across the road. A postal truck turned the corner. For one brief moment, I told myself I might go inside, make breakfast, and wait until evening to decide what to do. Then I heard the scraping. Metal against metal. My daughter was at the mailbox, and inside my purse, my name was still exactly where the law said it belonged. For the rest of that day, I carried the deed around like a secret heartbeat. I did not put it in the file cabinet. I did not slide it into the desk drawer, where Emily might organize things without asking. I kept it in my purse, and when I went upstairs to change, I carried the purse with me. When I made lunch, it sat on the chair beside me. When I watered Robert's roses, the purse hung from my shoulder like I was afraid the house itself might try to give up my proof. Emily noticed. Of course she did. My daughter had developed a way of watching me without looking directly at me. She would stir her coffee and glance toward my purse. She would walk through the kitchen and pause near the chair where I had placed it. Once, while I was folding dish towels, she said, "Mom, you're acting nervous." I kept my eyes on the towels. Am I? Yes. Ever since this morning. This morning gave me reason. She sighed long and theatrical. Are we still talking about the mailbox? I looked up then. My name was on it. And now the family name is on it. The Carter name is not my family name. Her face tightened. I'm your daughter. Yes, I said softly. You are. For 1 second, something flickered in her expression. Shame, maybe, or anger at being made to feel shame. Then Kevin walked in, and whatever softness had been there disappeared like a match blown out. He carried a folder. I noticed it immediately. It was navy blue with a silver clip at the top and several documents tucked inside. He held it casually, but not too casually. A man like Kevin never not too casually. A man like Kevin never carried papers into a room by accident. Grace, he said, smiling, do you have a minute? Every warning inside me stood up. Emily crossed her arms and leaned against the counter. We wanted to talk to you about something practical. Carried papers into a room by accident. Grace, he said, smiling, do you have a minute? Every warning inside me stood up. Emily crossed her arms and leaned against the counter. We wanted to talk to you about something practical. Practical. Another word people use when they do not want to say greedy. I dried my hands slowly on the towel. All right. Kevin placed the folder on the kitchen table, not in front of me at first, but near the center, as if we were all equal parties in a decision about my life. First, he said, I want you to know we appreciate you letting us stay here. I said nothing, and I know this transition has been emotional. This is not a transition, I said. Emily gave Kevin a look the kind married couples give each other when one is supposed to handle the difficult person. He nodded gently. Fair enough, but with all of us under one roof, there are some household matters we need to streamline. Streamline insurance, utilities, repairs, emergency decisions, things like that. I pulled out the chair and sat down because my knees had started to feel weak. Not from fear exactly, from the effort of staying calm. Kevin opened the folder. The top page looked harmless. A printed list of home repairs, including the side door lock he had already changed without permission, the kitchen window Emily had complained about, and a note about potential basement moisture. Beneath that was a second page with numbers, estimated costs, contractor names, possible financing options. Then came the papers he hoped I would not understand. He slid them toward me with a pen. These are just preliminary authorizations, he said. Nothing dramatic. I did not touch the pen. What kind of authorizations? Emily pushed away from the counter. Mom, don't start. I asked a question. Kevin's smile stayed in place, but something behind it cooled. Permission for me to speak with certain agencies and institutions on your behalf. It makes things easier. That way, if the insurance company needs information, or if we need quotes tied to property value, you don't have to handle every call. I have handled every call in this house for 41 years. Emily rubbed her forehead. That's exactly the problem. You think because you've always done things alone, you still have to. I do not have to, I said. I choose to. Kevin tapped one of the pages with his finger. Grace, no one is trying to take anything from you. The sentence arrived too quickly. People who are not trying to take anything rarely need to say so before being accused. I leaned forward and read the first document more carefully. The print was small, full of phrases that sounded soft until you understood their teeth. Property management authorization, financial inquiry consent, access to homeowner records, permission to obtain estimates related to equity-supported improvements. Equity. There it was. Not safety, not convenience, not family. Equity. I looked up. Why does this mention equity? Kevin did not blink. Because some major repairs can be financed through home equity options if needed. Again, just options. I did not ask for options. Emily Stye did not ask for options. Emily stepped closer to the table. Mom, the roof is old. The kitchen is outdated. The basement could have water issues. Do you think all of that fixes itself? The roof does not leak. Not yet. Stepped closer to the table. Mom, the roof is old. The kitchen is outdated. The basement could have water issues. Do you think all of that fixes itself? The roof does not leak. Not yet. The kitchen works. It works for a woman living alone, she snapped. Not for a family. The words fell between us. A family. As if I had become something less than that. I folded my hands in my lap so she would not see them tremble. This house does not need to become something else because you moved into it. Emily's eyes flashed. We moved into it because you said yes. For a few weeks. You keep saying that like we're strangers who checked into a motel. No, I said. I say it because it is what you told me. Kevin raised both hands slightly. Let's not turn this into a fight. But he had brought the battlefield to my kitchen table. He turned the next page toward me. This one is just so Emily can be listed as a family contact for property-related matters. Very standard. I read the heading. Limited durable authorization. My stomach clenched. I was no lawyer, but I had worked in a school office long enough to know that words mattered. Limited did not always mean harmless. Durable did not sound temporary. Authorization could become a door that did not close once opened. I would like to have my lawyer look at this, I said. Emily laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your lawyer, Mom. You don't have a lawyer. You have some old man Dad used 30 years ago. Daniel Harris is not some old man. He's probably retired. Then I will find another. Her face hardened. Why are you acting like we're enemies? That was the question that hurt most. Not because it was fair, but because it was cruelly familiar. Emily had used questions like that when she was 16 and wanted to make my boundaries sound like betrayal. I took a breath. Because you removed my name from my mailbox this morning. She threw up her hands. It was a mailbox. It was my name. It was embarrassing, she shouted. The kitchen went silent. Even Kevin looked at her. Emily's cheeks flushed, but she did not take it back. Do you know what it looks like, Mom? That old plate, this old furniture? Dad's picture everywhere? The curtains, the clutter you're holding on so tight that everything feels dead in here. I stared at my daughter. Dead. She had finally said what she meant. Not outdated, not tired. Dead. As if my memories were decay. As if Robert's presence in the home he built was something unpleasant guests had to step around. As if I had become one more relic she needed to clear before she could live properly. My voice came out very quiet. This house is not dead. Emily's eyes shone, but not with sorrow. Then let it help the living. There it was, the heart of it. She was not asking for help with repairs. She was asking the house to become money leverage status rescue. She wanted the house to serve her life now, not someday after I was gone. She wanted inheritance without waiting for death control, without ownership authority, without gratitude. Kevin slid the pen closer. "Grace," he said, smooth as polished stone, "signing these doesn't give us the house. It only lets us help you make responsible decisions." Responsible. At 68 years old, in the home I had paid for, seated at the table where I had served them dinner, I was being spoken to like a child too stubborn to understand bedtime. I looked past Kevin and saw Ava standing halfway down the stairs. She had one hand on the banister, her face pale. She looked at the papers, then at me, and gave the smallest shake of her head. My heart broke for her. No child should have to stand in the shadows and beg silently for the adults to stop doing wrong. Emily noticed my gaze and turned. "Ava, go upstairs." Ava opened her mouth, then closed it. "Now," Kevin said. She disappeared. I looked back at the pen. My whole life, I had been a woman who avoided scenes. At school, I calmed angry parents. At church, I smoothed over disagreements. In marriage, Robert and I talked things out before bitterness had room to grow. Even as a mother, I had often swallowed my own hurt to keep peace. But peace built on your silence is not peace. It is surrender wearing a pretty dress. I pushed the pen back across the table. "No." Emily went still. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated. "I am not signing anything today." Kevin's smile finally thinned. "Grace, maybe you should take some time to think." "I have thought." "Mom," Emily said, her voice dropping into something colder than anger, "you are making this harder than it needs to be." "No," I said. "You are." Her eyes filled then suddenly and conveniently. "I cannot believe this. After everything I'm trying to do for you, you look at me like I'm some kind of thief." I wanted to comfort her. That instinct rose in me before I could stop it. A mother sees tears, and her hands remember the child before the woman. But I held myself still. "You are asking me to sign papers I do not understand. I'm asking you to trust your daughter." Trust does not require a signature. Kevin closed the folder slowly. "We can revisit this later." That sounded less like patience and more like a promise. Emily snatched the folder from the table. "Fine. Keep living like everyone is trying to hurt you." I did not answer, because the truth was worse. I did not think everyone was trying to hurt me. Only the people sitting in my kitchen with papers they hoped I would sign before I understood them. That evening after they went upstairs, I took the deed from my purse and read my name again under the yellow kitchen light. Grace Ellen Bennett. I pressed my fingers to the ink. For the first time, I understood the full truth of what was happening. Emily did not want my house after I died. She wanted power over it while I was still alive. And if I had signed those papers, she would have taken the first step toward getting it. 3 nights after I refused to sign Kevin's papers, Emily hosted a dinner in my house without asking me. I learned about it from the grocery bags. That afternoon, I came back from the pharmacy with my blood pressure medication and found Emily unloading salmon wine, salad greens, candles, and a package of cloth napkins I had never seen before. Kevin was at the kitchen island arranging bottles like a bartender. Ava sat at the table with her homework open, but she was not reading. Her eyes kept moving from her mother to me. "What is all this?" I asked. Emily did not pause. "We're having a few people over tonight." I set my purse on the chair beside me, still unwilling to let the deed out of my sight. People. Just casual dinner. Kevin invited Mark and Denise from his office, and I asked the Andersons from 2 streets over. They've been so welcoming. The Andersons. I had met them once at Louise Miller's Christmas cookie exchange. Nice enough people, but strangers to me. You did not mention guests? I said. Emily opened a cabinet and frowned at my plates. I didn't think it would be a problem. It is my home, Emily. She shut the cabinet a little too hard. And we live here too, Mom. Temporarily, or whatever word you need me to say. Kevin stepped in smoothly. Grace, it's just dinner. Might be good for everyone to relax. Relax. That word almost made me laugh. Nothing about my life had felt relaxed since the morning my daughter changed the name on my mailbox. But I knew from the way Emily moved around the kitchen that this dinner was not about food. It was performance. It was proof. She wanted outsiders to sit in my house and see her as the woman in charge. By 6 o'clock, the living room no longer looked like mine. Emily had moved Robert's picture from the mantel again. This time, she placed it on the bookshelf behind a vase half hidden by eucalyptus branches. She lit candles on the coffee table, covered my old crocheted throw with a beige blanket, and set the dining room table with the new napkins. My regular salt and pepper shakers, shaped like little cardinals, had disappeared. In their place were sleek glass grinders Kevin said looked less country. Less country. Less me. I stood in the hallway, wearing the navy dress I usually saved for church. I had put it on because I refused to look like an unwanted old woman in my own home. But as I watched Emily tilt a wine glass toward the light, inspecting it for spots, I felt like a guest who had arrived too early and did not know where to stand. The doorbell rang at 6:30. Kevin greeted everyone, not me. Come in, he said warmly, taking coats and laughing like a man welcoming people into his own place. Emily followed behind him, bright and polished, touching arms, kissing cheeks, saying, We're so glad you could make it. The Andersons came first, Tom and Marcy. Then Kevin's co-worker Mark and his wife Denise. They all said hello to me politely, but with that slight hesitation people have when they are trying to figure out who belongs where. Emily solved it for them. This is my mom, Grace, she said, smiling. She's been sweet enough to share the house while we get settled. Share the house! I looked at her. She did not look back. Marcy Anderson smiled at me. That must be nice having family close. Yes, I said. Family close can be very revealing. Ava coughed into her napkin. Emily's eyes flicked toward me, warning sharp as a pin. Dinner began with compliments. Everyone admired the house. Of course they did. It was a good house, warm in the winter, shaded in the summer, sturdy in storms. Robert had believed in fixing things before they broke, and because of him, the walls still held strong. This place has great character, Mark said, looking toward the built-in shelves. Kevin leaned back in his chair. That's what I keep telling Grace. The bones are fantastic. With the right updates, it could be something really special. It already is, I wanted to say. But Emily spoke first. We have so many ideas, she said, opening the kitchen wall, replacing the cabinets, maybe turning the sewing room into an office. The flow could be beautiful. My fork paused halfway to my plate. The sewing room. That little room at the back of the house was mine. It held my machine fabric scraps, Robert's old tackle box full of buttons, and the quilt I had started after his diagnosis but never finished. It was not just a room. It was where I went when grief needed something to do with its hands. You did not mention changing my sewing room, I said. Emily smiled at the guests. Mom doesn't like change. The table chuckled softly because they thought it was harmless. I felt my face grow warm. I like being asked, I said. Silence settled for half a second. Kevin lifted his wine glass. And we always value Grace's input. Input in my own house. Ava looked down at her plate. After that, I tried to stay quiet. I told myself not to embarrass anyone, though no one seemed worried about embarrassing me. I listened while Kevin talked about property values in the neighborhood. I listened while Emily described our vision for the house. I listened while Denise said, It must be exciting to make a place your own. make a place your own. My hand tightened around my napkin. Then Tom Anderson, who meant no harm, nodded toward the hallway where a framed photograph still hung of Robert holding baby Emily beside the maple tree. "Is that your late husband?" he asked me. For the first time that evening, someone had addressed me not as an accessory, but as a person with history. I turned toward the photo and felt my heart soften. Yes, that's Robert. He planted that maple the year Emily was born. He said every child should grow with a tree. Marcy smiled. "That's lovely." Encouraged, I continued. "He carried that sapling home in the back of our old Buick. It barely fit. Emily cried the whole way because one of the branches kept touching her car seat." Ava smiled for real then. "I never heard that story." Emily's chair scraped lightly. "Mom," she said, her voice tight, "maybe not tonight." I looked at her. "Why not tonight?" She leaned close enough that only those nearest us could hear. "Because you always make everything sad." The words struck me harder than if she had shouted. I sat back. Around the table, people pretended not to notice. That is what polite people do when cruelty appears over dinner. They look at their plates and hope it passes them by. But cruelty rarely passes. It lingers. It seasons the food. It changes the air. For the rest of the meal, I barely spoke. When dessert came, Emily served lemon cake from a bakery and accepted praise as if she had baked it herself. Kevin talked about interest rates. Mark told a story about a client who sat on a property for too long and lost a chance to profit. Emily laughed too loudly. I wondered if they heard themselves. I wondered if they understood that I was not an empty chair waiting to be moved, not a locked account waiting for access, not a fading signature on old paperwork. I was still there, breathing, remembering, listening. After the guests left, Emily stood in the dining room collecting plates with quick, angry movements. "You embarrassed me," she said. "I almost dropped the glass I was holding. I embarrassed you, yes. The comments, the looks. Bringing up Dad like that? Your father's name is allowed in his own house." She turned on me. It's not his house anymore. The room went still. Even Kevin rinsing dishes at the sink stopped. I looked at my daughter for a long time. "No," I said quietly. "Legally, it is mine. But morally, Emily, his love is still in these walls." Her face twisted. "That's exactly what I mean. You talk like the house is a tomb." "No, you treat it like a prize." She inhaled sharply, but before she could answer, Ava stood up. "Mom, stop." Emily turned. "Excuse me?" Ava's voice shook, but she did not sit down. "Grandma didn't do anything wrong." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Kevin said, "Ava, that's enough." She looked at him with wet eyes. "No, it isn't." Emily stared at her daughter as if seeing disobedience for the first time. Ava fled upstairs before anyone could stop her. The kitchen became painfully quiet. Emily blamed me with her eyes. Kevin dried his hands with deliberate calm. I picked up the last plate and carried it to the sink, because sometimes ordinary motions are the only thing keeping a woman from falling apart. Later that night, after the house settled, I went into the living room to put Robert's picture back on the mantel, but it was already there. I stopped in the doorway. The vase had been moved aside. His photograph stood exactly where it belonged, centered beneath the clock. In front of it, someone had placed one of the little cardinal salt shakers Emily had hidden away. I heard a soft sound behind me. Ava stood at the foot of the stairs. "I put him back," she whispered. My throat tightened so suddenly I could not speak. She walked to me, and for the first time since she had moved in, she reached for my hand, like she had when she was little. "I'm sorry, Grandma," she said. I squeezed her fingers. "You have nothing to be sorry for." She looked toward the ceiling, where her parents' voices murmured behind a closed bedroom door. "Yes," she said. "I do, because I think I knew something was wrong before we ever came here." I held her hand tighter. Outside, beneath the porch light, the mailbox still wore the Carter name. But inside the house on the mantel, Robert's photograph faced the room again. And for that one small moment, I did not feel completely erased. The morning Emily took me to see the senior apartment, she told me we were going to brunch. That was how carefully she had learned to lie. She came downstairs wearing a soft pink sweater and carrying my beige coat over her arm, smiling as if the previous night's cruelty had been washed clean with the breakfast dishes. "Mom," she said, "why don't we get out for a little while? Just the two of us." I was standing at the sink rinsing my oatmeal bowl. My purse sat on the counter within reach. By then, it had become an extension of my body. I carried it from room to room, and if that made me look suspicious, so be it. Suspicion had started looking a lot like survival. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Brunch," she said lightly. "There's a cute cafe near Centerville I've wanted to try." The invitation landed on a tender place inside me. Even after everything, even after the mailbox, the papers, the dinner, and the way she had spoken about Robert, part of me still wanted one quiet meal with my daughter. I wanted to believe there was a mother and child beneath all the pushing. I wanted to sit across from her over coffee and hear her say, "I'm sorry, Mom. I got scared. I got carried away. So I put on the coat." Ava was at the bottom of the stairs when we left. She looked from Emily to me, then to my purse. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Brunch," Emily answered too quickly. Ava's eyes narrowed. Since when do I report to you?" Emily snapped. The girl flinched. I hated that flinch. I touched Ava's arm. "I'll be back soon, sweetheart." She looked like she wanted to say more, but Kevin appeared behind her holding his phone, and Ava closed her mouth. The drive was quiet at first. Emily kept both hands on the wheel and played a soft country station, the kind of music she used to complain about when she was a teenager. Outside the window, suburban Ohio rolled by in familiar pieces: strip malls, dental offices, fast food signs, church billboards promising grace in big blue letters. For almost 10 minutes, I allowed myself to imagine that maybe we really were going to brunch. Then Emily turned into a complex with a stone sign that read, "Willow Creek Senior Living." My stomach dropped. "This is not a cafe," I said. Emily did not look at me. "They have a dining room." I stared through the windshield at the neat brick buildings, the trimmed hedges, the smiling older couple pictured on a banner near the entrance. Independent living, comfort, community, peace of mind. Peace of mind for whom, I wondered. "Emily," I said slowly, "why are we here?" She parked in a visitor space and turned off the engine. "I just want you to look." "At what?" "At options." The word made my skin go cold. I did not ask for options. "You never do," she said. "That's why I have to help." For a moment, I did not move. The seatbelt pressed across my chest. I could hear the tick of the cooling engine and the faint laughter of two women walking along the sidewalk with small dogs. Everything around us seemed pleasant, safe, harmless. That made it worse. Emily got out of the car and came around to open my door. "Not as a courtesy, as pressure. Come on, Mom. Don't be stubborn in the parking lot." I almost said no. I almost stayed in that passenger seat and refused to take one step toward the building. But then I saw through the glass doors a woman in a navy blazer waiting with a folder and a practiced smile. Emily had made an appointment. Not a spontaneous visit, not a suggestion. An appointment. And suddenly, I wanted to know how far she had gone. So I stepped out. The woman in the blazer introduced herself as Patricia, the community director. She shook Emily's hand first. "We're so glad you both came," Patricia said. "Emily has told me so much about you, Mrs. Bennett." I looked at my daughter. "Has she?" Emily's smile tightened. "Only good things." Patricia led us through a lobby that smelled of fresh flowers and disinfectant. There was a fireplace, a piano, a bulletin board with activities, and a group of women playing cards near the window. It was not a bad place. That was important to say. Many people would have been happy there. Maybe someday, if I chose it for myself, I could have found comfort in a place like that. But choice is the line between help and control. Without choice, even a beautiful room can feel like a cage. Patricia showed us a one-bedroom apartment on the second floor. It had beige carpet, a kitchenette, a bathroom with grab bars, and a balcony overlooking a courtyard. Emily walked through it with bright, eager eyes. "See, Mom, no stairs, no yard to maintain, meals if you want them. People your age. People your age." I stood in the middle of the tiny living room and imagined my sewing machine against the wall. Robert's picture on the small counter, my whole life reduced to what could fit beside a recliner and a television. Patricia opened a closet. Many of our residents find downsizing very freeing. Downsizing. That word sounded gentle until I pictured Emily deciding what parts of my life were too large to keep. "I have a home," I said. Emily sighed. "You have a house." I turned to her. She did not seem to understand the difference between those words, and that alone nearly broke me. Patricia, sensing tension, smiled politely. "This is just an exploratory visit." "Is it?" I asked. Emily's cheeks colored. "Mom," I looked at Patricia, "did my daughter tell you I wanted to move?" The woman hesitated. That hesitation answered more than words could. "She said your family was beginning the transition conversation," Patricia said carefully. "The transition from what?" Emily stepped forward. "From living alone in a house that's too much for you." "I am not living alone," I said. "You moved in, and that was not meant to be permanent." "No," I said. "It was not." For once, Emily had nothing ready. I walked to the balcony door and looked down at the courtyard. A man in a baseball cap sat on a bench feeding crumbs to birds. He looked peaceful. I hoped he had chosen that bench. I hoped no one had tricked him into touring it by promising pancakes. On the drive home, Emily was angry. "You humiliated me," she said. I looked out the window. "You lied to me. I was trying to make this easier." "For whom?" "For everyone." Her voice cracked. "Do you think this is easy for me? Watching you rattle around in that old house like some ghost, watching bills pile up, watching Kevin stress about money while you sit on a paid-off property and refuse to think about the future." There it was again, the property, not my safety, not my happiness, the property. "What bills?" I asked quietly. She gripped the wheel. "What?" "You said bills are piling up. My bills are paid." "So whose bills?" Emily's mouth tightened. "Forget it." But I did not forget it. When we got home, Kevin was in the living room on his laptop. He shut it too quickly when we walked in. Ava came from the kitchen, eyes searching my face. "You okay, Grandma?" "Yes," I said. "I am." Emily tossed her keys into a bowl. She hated it, obviously. Ava looked confused. "Hated what, the apartment?" I said. Ava's eyes widened. What apartment? Kevin stood. "Emily." I looked at him. "Did you know?" No one answered. That evening, I began documenting everything. I found an old spiral notebook in my sewing room, the kind I once used for grocery lists and Christmas planning. On the first page, I wrote the date. Then I wrote, Emily removed my name from Mailbox and replaced it with the Carters. Louise witnessed. Kevin present. I wrote about the bank call, the deed, the papers, the dinner, the apartment visit. Writing it down made me feel less crazy. That is something people do not tell you. When family mistreats you, they often wrap it in such familiar words that you begin questioning your own memory. Help, concern, practical, family, future. But ink does not soften itself to spare anyone's feelings. Ink tells the truth plainly. Later, while taking kitchen trash out to the bin, I noticed a crumpled paper near the bottom of the bag. It had missed the liner and wedged against the side. I almost left it. Then I saw Kevin's name. I pulled it out and smoothed it on top of the dryer. It was not a full document, only a printed draft of an email. Several lines were crossed out in pen. My eyes moved quickly until one phrase froze me in place. Current elderly occupant will need to be relocated before final property evaluation. Elderly occupant, not mother-in-law, not Grace Bennett, not owner. Occupant, relocated. I had to grip the dryer to stay upright. In that moment, something inside me changed. The hurt was still there, but it stepped aside for something stronger. Not rage, not revenge. A kind of clear, steady refusal. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my notebook. Then I took my phone and photographed it. Upstairs, Emily and Kevin argued behind their closed door. Ava's room was silent. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and betrayal. I went to the mantel and looked at Robert's picture. "I'm not leaving," I whispered. And for the first time, I was not saying it because I was afraid. I was saying it because I had begun to fight back. The night Ava finally told me the truth, the entire house felt as if it were holding its breath. Emily had gone upstairs early after another argument with Kevin. Their voices had risen through the vents during dinner sharp and hurried, though they both fell silent whenever I entered the room. Kevin spent most of the evening on his phone in the den. Ava barely touched her food. I washed the dishes alone. No one offered to help. That had become another quiet change inside my house. During their first week, Emily talked constantly about helping me. By the second month, I had become the one cleaning up after everyone again. Coffee cups appeared beside the television, shoes gathered by the front door, laundry baskets sat in the hallway. I had become the caretaker of people who were trying to replace me. By 10 o'clock, the house was dark except for the lamp beside Robert's chair. I sat there with my notebook open on my lap. Bank call, mailbox, papers, senior apartment, the email, the words, elderly occupant. I had written everything down. At first, I thought keeping records made me paranoid, but now the notebook felt like an anchor. Every sentence reminded me that I was not imagining what was happening. When people slowly move your life around, they often make you question your own memory first. A floorboard creaked upstairs, then another. A few minutes later, I heard soft footsteps descending the staircase. Ava. She appeared in the dim light wearing gray pajama pants and one of her school sweatshirts. Her hair was loose and her eyes looked swollen as if she had been crying. "Grandma?" I closed the notebook. "What is it, sweetheart?" She glanced toward her parents' bedroom. "Can I sit with you?" Of course. She lowered herself onto the sofa and pulled her knees toward her chest. For a while, neither of us spoke. The old clock above the mantel ticked quietly. Outside, wind moved through the maple tree Robert had planted decades earlier. Ava looked so young in that moment, not 17, not almost an adult, just a frightened little girl sitting in her grandmother's living room. "You don't have to protect me," I said softly. Her eyes filled immediately. "I know," No, sweetheart, you really don't. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I heard them. My chest tightened. Heard who? Mom and Dad. When? She stared at the carpet. More than once I waited. They think I'm asleep. The words came slowly at first, like someone walking across ice that might crack. Dad talks about the house all the time, she said. He says it's the only thing that can fix everything. What does that mean? She swallowed. He lost money. I sat perfectly still. How much I don't know. Did he tell your mother? Ava nodded. They fight about it. I felt cold despite the blanket across my lap. What kind of money? I sat perfectly still. How much I don't know. Did he tell your mother? Ava nodded. They fight about it. I felt cold despite the blanket across my lap. What kind of money? Investments? Loans. I don't understand all of it. That sounded exactly like Kevin. Complicated words. Financial language. Risks dressed as opportunities. Ava twisted her fingers together. One night, I heard Dad say that if Mom got her name added before you changed your mind, everything would work out. My heart stopped. What exactly did he say? She looked at me with frightened eyes. He said, once Emily is on the papers, we can finally breathe again. The room became very quiet. I heard the refrigerator hum in the kitchen. A car passed somewhere down the street. The world continued moving while mine seemed to stop. Did your mother say anything? Ava hesitated. She said you were stubborn. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I had not already guessed it, because hearing it through my granddaughter made it real. She said you always choose Dad over her. I looked toward Robert's photograph. How strange that love could become an accusation. Ava continued quietly. Dad said you'd eventually have to move somewhere anyway. I closed my eyes. And then he said it would be easier if everything was already arranged. Arranged? Such a polite word. As if I were furniture. As if my life could simply be rearranged. Tears rolled down Ava's cheeks. I'm sorry. I immediately reached for her hand. No. Yes, she whispered. Because I didn't tell you sooner. You are not responsible for your parents. But I knew something was wrong. You were scared. She nodded. I still am. I pulled her gently toward me. She rested her head against my shoulder, exactly the way Emily used to when she was little. The memory almost broke me. How many mothers hold their daughters through fear only to be feared by those same daughters years later? I need you to answer one thing honestly, I said. She looked up. Did your mother want this? Ava stared at the floor. The silence lasted so long, I almost told her not to answer. Finally, she said, at first, I think Dad convinced her. I said nothing, but now, her voice trembled. Now I think Mom wants it too. That was the hardest truth of all. Not Kevin. Kevin had entered my life as an adult. I had never raised him, never carried him, never kissed his forehead when he was sick. But Emily belonged to every year of my life. The little girl who planted tulips with Robert, the teenager who cried after her first heartbreak, the young bride whose veil I fixed before she walked down the aisle. I had spent 43 years loving her, and somewhere along the way, money had begun speaking louder than memory. Ava suddenly asked, Grandma? Yes, why don't you just sell the house? The question surprised me, not because it was cruel, because it was honest. I looked around the living room. the bookshelf Robert built, the rug we bought with our tax refund, the marks near the kitchen doorway where Emily's height had been measured every birthday, the photograph over the fireplace, the lamp beside Robert's chair. This house is not just walls, I said quietly. Ava listened. When your grandfather and I bought this place, we had almost nothing. We painted every room ourselves. We fixed broken pipes ourselves. We worked weekends. We skipped vacations. We made sacrifices your mother never even knew about. She nodded. People think a house is money. I looked toward the front window. But sometimes a house is evidence. Evidence that your life happened. The tears returned to my eyes. This house proves your grandfather existed. It proves we loved each other. It proves we raised a daughter. It proves I mattered. Ava reached for my hand. You still matter. Those 3 words nearly undid me, because for months I had begun feeling invisible inside my own home, old, inconvenient, temporary. But this young girl sitting beside me saw me, and sometimes that is enough to keep someone standing. After a while, Ava lowered her voice. There's something else. I turned toward her. Dad has somebody coming. When Saturday? Who? A notary. My heart began beating hard. How do you know he was talking on the phone in the garage? What exactly did he say? He said, well, handle everything at the house Saturday afternoon. Saturday, only 4 days away. I suddenly understood why the pressure had increased. The papers, the apartment tour, the guilt, the arguments, they were moving towards something, some kind of signing, some kind of meeting, some kind of final push. Ava looked terrified. Are they going to make you leave? I took both of her hands. No. How do you know? Because inside my purse was the deed. Because inside my notebook was evidence. Because somewhere in Dayton was Daniel Harris. And because something inside me had finally stopped apologizing for existing. I kissed her forehead. No one is taking this house. The clock struck 11. Upstairs, I heard a door close. Ava stood. Mom will be angry if she knows I talked to you. I nodded. Then she doesn't need to know. She started toward the stairs, then stopped halfway. Grandma? Yes. If Grandpa were here, what would he do? I looked at Robert's picture. For a long moment, I could almost hear his voice. He had never been loud, never cruel, but he had always protected what mattered. I smiled sadly. He would tell me not to be afraid of my own front door. Ava nodded. Then she climbed the stairs. I remained in the living room long after midnight. Finally, I opened my notebook. Under the previous entries, I wrote Ava overheard Kevin discussing adding Emily to papers. Notary coming Saturday. Possible signing planned. I stared at the sentence. Saturday. The words seemed to sit on the page like a storm cloud. I closed the notebook. Then I reached for the business card still resting inside my purse. Daniel Harris, attorney at law. For weeks I had hoped things would improve. I had hoped my daughter would wake up. I had hoped Kevin would back away. I had hoped love alone could fix this. But hope without action is simply waiting. And I was finished waiting. Tomorrow I would call the man Robert trusted. And for the first time since Emily tore my name from the mailbox, I felt something stronger than grief. I felt ready. I called Daniel Harris the next morning. For nearly 10 years, his business card had remained inside my desk drawer, beside old stamps, expired coupons, and Robert's fountain pen. I had not needed him since the day after Robert's funeral, when he helped me file the final paperwork, transferring the house solely into my name. Back then, Daniel had gray hair. By now, I assumed he might be retired, moved away, or perhaps no longer practicing at all. But when the receptionist answered and transferred the call, I heard a familiar voice. Daniel Harris. For a moment, I could not speak. Daniel. I finally said, "This is Grace Bennett." There was a brief silence. Then his voice softened. Grace. My goodness, it's been a long time. Yes, Daniel Harris. For a moment, I could not speak. Daniel, I finally said, "This is Grace Bennett." There was a brief silence. Then his voice softened. Grace. My goodness, it's been a long time. Yes. How are you? No one had asked me that honestly in months. Not how is your blood pressure, not how are the bills, not how is the house. Just, how are you? I surprised myself by answering truthfully. I think I may need your help. He became quiet. Tell me. So I did. Not all at once. I started with the bank call, the mailbox, the papers Kevin wanted me to sign, the senior apartment, the email, the notary scheduled for Saturday. Daniel interrupted only to ask small questions. Did you sign anything? No. Did you give power of attorney? No. Did you add your daughter to the deed? No. Do they have access to your financial accounts? No. At that answer, he exhaled. Good. I tightened my grip on the phone. Daniel, am I overreacting? The question came out before I could stop it. Months of doubt had trained me to ask permission for my own instincts. He answered immediately. No. The word landed inside me like solid ground. You are not overreacting, he said. You are responding to behavior that concerns you. Those are not the same thing. I sat at the kitchen table while morning sunlight crossed the floor. What should I do? First, he said, continue signing nothing. I already decided that. Good. Second, bring me copies of everything. I looked toward my notebook. I have notes. Bring them. I have the deed. Bring that too. I hesitated. And Saturday, he was quiet. What exactly did your granddaughter hear? I repeated Ava's words. A notary. Saturday afternoon. Handle everything at the house. Daniel made a sound deep in his throat. Grace people sometimes create pressure by arranging a signing event. Several people present. Documents prepared. Emotions involved. The goal is often to make someone feel unreasonable if they refuse. That sounds exactly right. Then you do not attend alone. My heart began to beat harder. You mean you... Yes. I sat very still. You would come? Robert was my client for 30 years. His voice softened. And you were his wife. Something inside me nearly broke. After Robert died, I had gradually become invisible to many people. Widows often do. The world begins referring to you through the life you lost. Robert's wife, Emily's mother, Ava's grandmother, rarely simply Grace. But Daniel remembered both. He remembered Robert, and he remembered me. Come to my office this afternoon, he said. I will. After hanging up, I remained seated for several minutes. The kitchen was quiet. Upstairs, I heard Emily moving around the bedroom. Kevin had already left for somewhere he called meetings, though I no longer trusted any explanation he offered. For the first time in months, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Supported. At noon, I drove myself downtown. Daniel's office had changed very little. The carpet was newer. The waiting room furniture had been replaced. But the shelves still held leather-bound law books, and the clock above his desk still ticked loudly enough to hear. He stood when I entered, older certainly. His hair had gone completely white. His shoulders had rounded, but his eyes remained exactly the same, kind, steady. He hugged me, not long, just enough. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. So am I. We sat. I handed him everything. The notebook, the printed email, the papers Kevin wanted signed, the certified deed. He read carefully, very carefully. I watched his face. Lawyers learn not to reveal much, but certain moments still reached his eyes. The phrase, elderly occupant, the financial authorization, the home equity references. Finally, he removed his glasses. Grace. Yes, you did exactly the right thing. Relief spread through me. I did, yes. He tapped the deed. You are the sole owner. He tapped the authorization forms. These are concerning. Illegal. Not necessarily. My stomach dropped. But he continued, that does not make them appropriate. He folded his hands. Kevin appears to be creating access to information, property records, financial communication, potential financing discussions. Could they take the house? He answered immediately. No. I closed my eyes. Not without your cooperation. What if they pressure me? Then you continue saying no. I looked down. I raised my daughter. I know. I never imagined I would need legal advice against her. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Robert worried about her sometimes. I looked up. What do you mean? He walked toward a file cabinet. For several moments, he searched through old folders. Finally, he removed a thin envelope. My heart stopped. Robert's handwriting. Daniel, he asked me to keep this if anything ever happened to him. My hands trembled. He said you might need it one day. I stared at the envelope. Grace. Only my name, nothing else. Why didn't you give it to me before? Because he said only if you truly needed it. I opened it carefully. The paper inside was yellowed slightly with age. Robert's handwriting leaned slightly to the right, exactly as I remembered. My Gracie, if Daniel is giving you this, then something has happened that makes you doubt yourself. Please don't. You have always been stronger than you believe. If Emily is struggling, help her, if you can. But never give away your safety to buy someone else's love. A house is only wood and nails to some people. But you and I built a life inside ours. Do not let anyone convince you that your memories are selfish. And please remember this. You do not owe anyone your home simply because they share your blood. Love them. Help them. Forgive them if you choose. But do not disappear for them. I love you. Always, Robert. I could not breathe. The office blurred. Daniel quietly handed me a tissue. I'm sorry. No, I whispered. Don't apologize. Because for the first time since Emily moved into the house, I no longer felt alone. Robert had seen something years ago. Perhaps not this exact situation. Perhaps not Kevin. Perhaps not the mailbox. But he had understood something important, that our daughter sometimes mistook love for obligation. I folded the letter carefully. May I keep this? Daniel smiled. It was always yours. Before I left, we discussed Saturday. What if they bring documents, do not sign? What if they pressure me? You say no. What if Emily cries? Then she cries. I almost laughed. He became serious again. There is something else. What? You may want to protect the house permanently. I frowned. How? A trust. I listened carefully. He explained that I could place the property into a protected living trust while retaining complete control during my lifetime. I would continue living there, continue owning it, continue making decisions, but it would become much harder for anyone to pressure me into sudden transfers or ownership changes. I thought about the mailbox, the apartment, the papers, the email, the phrase elderly occupant. I want to do it. He nodded. We can begin immediately. When I left the office, the afternoon sun felt warmer than it had in months. I drove home slowly. Robert's letter rested inside my purse beside the deed. 2 men, one dead, one old, both reminding me that I was not crazy. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Kevin's car. Emily stood near the front window talking on her phone. The mailbox still carried the Carter name, but for the first time, it no longer frightened me. Because inside my purse, I carried the deed. Inside my wallet, I carried Daniel's business card. And inside my heart, I carried Robert's final instruction. Do not disappear for them. Saturday was coming, and now I would not face it alone. Saturday arrived with rain, not a storm, not thunder, not the kind of weather that forces people indoors. Just a steady gray rain that covered the windows and made the entire house feel smaller. Water slid down the glass in narrow lines while the maple tree bent gently in the wind. I woke before 6. For several minutes, I lay in bed, listening to the rain and Robert's words repeating inside my mind. Do not disappear for them. The letter remained inside my purse beside the deed. I had read it 3 times the previous night. Every sentence felt like a hand reaching across the years. Downstairs, the house was still asleep. I made coffee. I fed the birds outside the kitchen window. I sat in Robert's chair and waited for fear to arrive. It never fully did. There was nervousness, certainly. My hands shook slightly when I lifted my cup. My stomach refused breakfast. But beneath the worry sat something new. Preparation. At 9 o'clock, Daniel called. Are you all right? Yes. Any changes? No. Good. I'll arrive at 1:30. I exhaled slowly. You really don't have to do this. Yes, I do. His voice became softer. Grace people behave differently when they realize someone is watching. After we hung up, I looked around the living room. The furniture stood exactly where it had always been. Robert's picture rested on the mantel. The old clock ticked above it. Everything appeared ordinary. But houses know things. Walls hear. Floors remember. And this house had spent months listening. Around 11, Kevin began preparing. That was the first confirmation. He wore a blue button-down shirt instead of his usual weekend clothes. He shaved carefully. He organized papers at the dining room table while Emily cleaned the kitchen with unusual energy. Neither of them had mentioned visitors. Neither had asked my permission. Ava sat quietly in the corner of the living room, reading a book she never turned pages in. She looked frightened. I walked over and squeezed her shoulder. It's going to be okay. She looked up. Are you sure? No, I said honestly. But it's still going to be okay. At 12:30, Emily finally approached me. She stood near the fireplace, arms crossed. Mom. Yes. We have someone stopping by this afternoon. I waited. A financial consultant. There it was. Not a notary, not papers, not signatures. A financial consultant. Why to discuss options? Whose options? She sighed. Do we really have to fight today? I folded my hands. I'm simply asking questions. Kevin entered carrying a folder. It's very informal, Grace. I see. No pressure, no obligation. Every reassuring phrase sounded rehearsed. The doorbell rang at exactly 1 o'clock. Kevin smiled.
Perfect.
He opened the front door. A man in his 50s entered carrying a leather briefcase. He wore a dark coat, damp from the rain.
Richard Cole, he said warmly. Financial consultant. Except he introduced himself differently. Certified estate planner? Estate, not repairs. Not budgeting. Estate.
My eyes met Ava's across the room. She looked terrified.
Richard shook my hand. Mrs. Bennett, pleasure to meet you. I nodded. What exactly is this meeting? Emily answered quickly. We're just discussing future planning. Richard opened his briefcase. Many families find these conversations helpful. Families. Conversations. Helpful. The room filled with soft words that carried hard intentions. He spread papers across my dining table. Trust options. Property transfer considerations. Beneficiary structures. Joint ownership pathways. I recognized enough to understand what was happening. They had not brought a notary. They had brought persuasion. Mrs. Bennett Richards said kindly, "Many parents choose to transfer property gradually while they are still living." I looked directly at him. Did I ask for this meeting? He hesitated. Emily answered, "We thought it would help." I turned back toward him. Did I ask for it? No. The room became quiet. Richard adjusted his glasses. Well, perhaps we can simply discuss possibilities. Kevin leaned forward. Grace? Nobody is forcing anything. I looked at the papers. One document described adding an adult child to property ownership. Another discussed survivorship arrangements. Another mentioned tax benefits. All perfectly legal. All perfectly dangerous if signed without understanding. Emily sat beside me. Mom, this isn't about taking your house. Then why are we discussing ownership? She blinked. It's about protecting everyone? Everyone from what? No answer. The rain continued outside. Richard cleared his throat. Mrs. Bennett, many families find peace in establishing certainty. I almost laughed. Peace. There had been no peace since the day my daughter removed my name from the mailbox. Suddenly, the front door opened. Everyone turned. Daniel Harris stepped inside carrying a wet umbrella. He removed his coat calmly. Good afternoon. The silence that followed felt almost physical. Emily stood. Who is this? I rose slowly. This is my attorney. Kevin's face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. The confidence disappeared. Richard immediately straightened. Attorney Daniel shook his hand. Daniel Harris. Recognition crossed Richard's face. Apparently, professionals recognize one another. Daniel sat beside me. Please continue. Nobody spoke. Emily looked at me as if I had betrayed her. The irony almost hurt. Kevin recovered first. This is just an informal family discussion. Daniel nodded. Then my presence shouldn't be a problem. Richard carefully gathered several papers. Well, I certainly don't wish to create discomfort. Daniel looked through the documents. His expression remained neutral. Interesting recommendations. Kevin folded his arms. There's nothing inappropriate here. Daniel nodded. Perhaps not. Emily looked relieved. Then he continued. But there is an important question. Everyone waited. He turned toward me. Grace, have you requested any ownership changes? No. Have you expressed interest in transferring your property? Emily looked relieved. Then he continued. But there is an important question. Everyone waited. He turned toward me. Grace, have you requested any ownership changes? No. Have you expressed interest in transferring your property? No. Have you asked for estate restructuring? No. He folded his hands. Then there appears to be no client requesting these services. Richard looked uncomfortable. Kevin's jaw tightened. Emily's face flushed. Daniel remained perfectly calm. The property owner has expressed no desire to pursue these options. The rain seemed louder now. Richard cleared his throat. Well, perhaps another time. No, I said. Everyone looked at me, including Daniel. I stood. My knees trembled slightly, but my voice did not. I want to say something. Nobody interrupted. I looked at Emily. When your father and I bought this house, we had $800 in savings. Her eyes lowered. We painted these walls together. I looked toward the kitchen. We raised you here, toward the staircase. We celebrated birthdays here, toward Robert's photograph. We buried grief here. I took a breath. For months, I have been treated like an obstacle. Emily's eyes filled. You have discussed my house without me. Kevin looked away. You have changed my locks. Silence. You removed my name from my mailbox. Emily began crying. You showed me apartments. Nobody moved. You brought papers. I looked directly at Kevin. You discussed relocating an elderly occupant. His face went pale. How I know. The room became completely still. Ava appeared quietly near the stairs. She was listening. I turned back to my daughter. I would have helped you. Tears rolled down her cheeks. If you needed money, I would have listened. She sobbed quietly. If you needed support, I would have tried. My own voice broke. But you did not come to me as my daughter. I looked at the papers. You came to me as someone trying to acquire something. Emily covered her face. Mom! No. For the first time in months, I interrupted her. This house is mine. I looked at the papers. You came to me as someone trying to acquire something. Emily covered her face. Mom, no. For the first time in months, I interrupted her. This house is mine. I removed the certified deed from my purse. My hand no longer shook. I own it. I placed it on the table. I live here. I looked at Kevin. I decide what happens here. Then I looked at my daughter. And I refuse to disappear to make your life easier. Nobody spoke. The rain had finally stopped. Outside the window, sunlight began breaking through the clouds. Richard quietly packed his briefcase. Daniel sat beside me. Ava was crying. Kevin looked defeated, but Emily looked broken. Not angry, not defensive, broken. And for the first time, I thought perhaps she was finally seeing what she had done. Because the truth had entered the room. And once truth sits down at the table, all the carefully arranged papers become much harder to sign. After Daniel left, nobody knew what to do. The rain had stopped, but the house still felt gray. Richard Cole gathered his papers with careful hands and avoided looking directly at me. He shook Daniel's hand again, nodded politely, and left through the front door without saying much. His car disappeared down the street, leaving behind a silence so heavy that even the clock on the mantel seemed louder. Emily stood beside the dining table. Kevin remained near the kitchen. Ava sat quietly on the stairs. And I stood in the middle of my own living room, holding the deed. For months, everyone had spoken around me. Now, they had to speak to me. Kevin cleared his throat first. Grace, nobody intended to hurt you. I looked at him. Then what exactly did you intend? He opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time since he moved into my home, the smooth answers had disappeared. Emily finally spoke. You made us look horrible. The words stunned me, not because they were cruel, because they were still about appearances.
I folded the deed carefully and returned it to my purse. No, Emily. Your choices did that. She wiped tears from her face. You brought a lawyer. You brought an estate planner. That was different. How? Her eyes flashed. Because I'm your daughter. There it was again. Blood as permission, family as authority, motherhood as obligation. I sat down slowly in Robert's chair. I spent your entire childhood protecting you. Emily looked away. When you broke your arm at 12, I slept in a hospital chair. Silence. When you failed algebra, I hired a tutor we couldn't afford. She lowered her eyes. When your first husband left you, you slept in this house for 6 months. Kevin shifted uncomfortably. He had never liked hearing about Emily's first marriage. And when your father died, I continued, I believed that someday we would become close again. Emily began crying harder. So don't tell me I have forgotten what it means to be your mother. Nobody moved. The house had finally stopped pretending. Ava slowly came down the stairs and sat beside me. That simple movement changed everything, because until that moment, Ava had stood between us. Now she chose where to sit. Emily noticed. Really, she whispered. Ava looked at her mother with tears in her eyes. You lied to Grandma. Emily looked wounded. You don't understand. I understand enough. Kevin stepped forward. Ava, stay out of this. No. The word surprised all of us, including Ava herself. She stood. I heard you talking. Kevin's face drained of color. You said the house would solve everything. Emily looked at him. Kevin looked at the floor. Ava continued. You talked about adding Mom to papers. Silence. You talked about moving Grandma. Emily began shaking her head. Ava, no! The young woman who had spent months frightened and quiet suddenly sounded stronger than either parent. She cried because of you. Emily burst into tears. Kevin Roffew. Emily burst into tears. Kevin rubbed his forehead. The truth had entered the room, and truth does not leave because people become uncomfortable. Eventually, Kevin sat down heavily. He looked older than I had ever seen him. Fine, rubbed his forehead. The truth had entered the room, and truth does not leave because people become uncomfortable. Eventually, Kevin sat down heavily. He looked older than I had ever seen him. Fine. Nobody spoke. He stared at his hands. I lost money. Emily closed her eyes. How much, I asked. He answered quietly. Almost everything. The room became still again. I invested in 2 development projects. He swallowed. They failed. How much? 400,000. Emily began crying again. My breath caught. $400,000. Not bad budgeting, not temporary stress, disaster. The bank called our loans. Kevin spoke without looking at anyone. We refinanced our house. Emily whispered Kevin. He ignored her. Then I borrowed against retirement accounts. My heart sank. And then I thought I could recover it. Robert used to say those words were the most expensive sentence in America. I thought I could recover it. Kevin finally looked at me. When we realized your house was paid off? He stopped. The silence completed the sentence. My house became the answer. Not me. The house. Emily sat down across from me. I didn't mean for it to become this. I looked at my daughter. When did it start? She wiped her eyes. After Dad died. That answer hurt more than all the others, because it meant grief had created opportunity. She looked around the room. You stayed here alone. I wanted to. You kept everything exactly the same. Yes. I thought Her voice broke. I thought maybe the house was wasted. Wasted. Robert's chair, the maple tree, the sewing room, our kitchen, our marriage. Wasted. I took a long breath. This house waited for you your entire life. Emily cried openly now. When you came home from college, it waited. She nodded. When your marriage ended, it waited. More tears. When your father died, it waited. She covered her face. But a house is not wasted simply because an old woman lives inside it. Ava reached for my hand. Kevin stared at the floor. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Finally, Emily whispered, "I'm sorry." The words floated through the room, small, late, but real. I studied her face. There was no performance left. No audience. No visitors. No estate planners. Just my daughter. Tired, ashamed, afraid. "I don't know how it became this," she said. I answered quietly. "One small step at a time." She nodded. The questions, the paperwork, the lock, the mailbox. Each act had made the next one easier. Kevin finally looked up. "I owe you an apology, too." I waited. I convinced myself we were helping. You were helping yourselves. His eyes lowered. Yes, that honesty mattered. Not enough to erase anything, but enough to begin. Outside sunlight finally broke through the clouds. The living room grew brighter. A strange calm settled over the house. For the first time in months, nobody was pretending. Nobody was selling. Nobody was persuading. Nobody was explaining. Only truth remained. Later that evening, Daniel called to check on me. "Are you all right?" I looked around the living room. Emily sat quietly at the dining table. Kevin was helping Ava make tea. Robert's photograph remained on the mantel. "Yes," I said. "You sound different." I smiled slightly. I think everyone finally stopped lying. After dinner, Emily knocked on my bedroom door. She stood there, looking smaller somehow. Not physically, emotionally. "Can I come in?" "Yes." She sat on the edge of the chair beside my dresser. For several moments, she simply looked around the room. Her childhood photographs, Robert's watch, the old quilt. "My friends used to love this room." I smiled faintly. "You painted the walls yellow. You hated yellow." I was 13. We both laughed quietly. The first laugh in months. Then she looked down. "Did Dad really leave you a letter?" "Yes." "What did it say?" I thought for a moment. "He told me not to disappear." Tears returned to her eyes. "I think I asked you to." I reached across and took her hand. "Yes." She cried. I was scared. "I know. We're losing everything. I know. I thought if we could just get through this." She could not finish. I squeezed her fingers. "But you forgot something." "What?" "You never asked." She nodded slowly, and that was the truth at the center of everything. Not money, not debt, not property. She had stopped asking. She had begun taking. And somewhere between those two things, she had lost sight of her mother. Before leaving my room, Emily stopped at the door. "Are you going to make us leave?" I looked toward the window. The rainwater still clung to the glass. The mailbox stood at the curb. The Carter name still attached. For now. "I haven't decided." She nodded. "I understand." After she left, I sat quietly beside Robert's photograph. For the first time since this nightmare began, I could see the end approaching. Not the end of the family. Not yet, but the end of pretending. The debts were real. The betrayal was real. The pain was real. And now, finally, so was the truth. The house became quieter after Saturday. Not peaceful. Not yet. Just quieter. The arguments stopped. The whispered conversations behind closed doors disappeared. Kevin spent long hours outside the house making phone calls from his car. Emily moved through the rooms as if she had forgotten where to place her hands. For months, they had acted like people arriving. Now they looked like people waiting. Monday morning, I woke before sunrise and sat alone at the kitchen table with Robert's letter. I had begun reading it every morning, not because I needed the words anymore, because I needed the man who had written them. Outside the mailbox still carried the Carter name. Every time I looked through the window, I saw it standing beside the road like a small insult planted in my front yard. But I had not changed it, not yet. Some things need to be witnessed before they are corrected. Around 8 o'clock, Ava came downstairs carrying a backpack. "You're up early," I said. She smiled faintly. "I have finals." I poured her coffee, mostly milk and sugar, the way she liked it. She sat across from me. "Mom cried last night." I stirred my tea. "I know. She thinks you hate her." That sentence hurt, because it sounded exactly like Emily at 16, exactly like Emily at 23, exactly like Emily at 30. Whenever consequences arrived, she often mistook them for rejection. "I don't hate your mother." Ava looked relieved. "She says you'll never forgive her." I looked toward the window. Forgiveness. People talk about it as if it arrives suddenly like rain. But sometimes, forgiveness is construction work. Slow, messy, noisy. "Tell your mother I'm still here." Ava nodded. That afternoon, Daniel called. "The trust documents are ready." I closed my eyes. "All ready. Yes. Can we meet tomorrow?" Of course. The trust. For weeks I had thought about little else. Not because I wanted to punish Emily, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood something Robert had always known. Love and protection are not opposites. You can love someone deeply and still protect yourself from them. When Emily came home that evening, she looked exhausted. There were dark circles beneath her eyes. Her makeup had been removed. She looked younger and older. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded. We sat in the living room, the same room where she had taken her first steps, the same room where she had opened Christmas presents, the same room where she had once slept on the couch after nightmares. She looked at Robert's picture. "I used to think Dad loved you more." The confession surprised me. I remained silent. "When I was little, I hated the way he looked at you." I turned toward her. "Hated?" She nodded. "You were always first." A strange sadness settled over me. "Emily, your father loved you." "I know." "No, I don't think you do." She began crying quietly. "When he died, I felt like you still had him." I looked at the photograph, and I lost him. I had never considered that. While I was grieving, my husband, perhaps my daughter, had been grieving her father and resenting the marriage she could never compete with. She continued. "After Dad died, the house felt like him." I understood. "The chair." I nodded. "The garage?" "Yes." "His tools?" "Yes." She looked around the room. "And you kept everything." "I wasn't ready, I know." She lowered her eyes. "But every time I visited, it felt like Dad still lived here, and I didn't." The truth of that sentence landed heavily between us. Perhaps the house had become a battlefield long before Kevin's debts. Perhaps grief had quietly entered first.
Kevin had simply brought money into a wound that already existed.
I should have talked to you, she whispered. Yes. Instead, I started thinking about what would happen to the house.
Kevin had simply brought money into a wound that already existed.
I should have talked to you, she whispered. Yes. Instead, I started thinking about what would happen to the house.
Yes. And then Kevin started talking about finances. I waited, and somehow it stopped feeling like your house. That sentence hurt because it was honest. Not correct, but honest.
I took her hand. This house was never choosing between you and your father. She cried. I know your father loved you. I know. He would be heartbroken right now. That broke her completely. She covered her face and sobbed. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Eventually, she whispered, Are we ruined? The question surprised me. Who? Our family. I looked around the room. The answer sat everywhere. Ava studying upstairs. Robert's photograph. The kitchen. The maple tree outside. No, I said. Really, no. She looked confused. How?
Because ruined people stop caring. She wiped her eyes. You still care. So do you. She shook her head. I wanted your house.
No.
She looked up. You wanted safety. She stared at me. You simply chose the wrong thing to save you. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I met Daniel. The trust documents sat neatly organized inside a blue folder. He explained everything carefully. I would remain the sole beneficiary during my lifetime. The property would remain under my complete control. No transfer, no ownership change, no pressure, no emergency decisions made by anyone else. Once this is signed, he said, nobody can persuade you into quick changes. I smiled slightly. I wish I had done this years ago. So does Robert. That made me laugh. For the first time in a very long time. I signed the documents, slowly, carefully. My name looked steadier than it had in months. Grace Ellen Bennett, the same name that once stood on my mailbox. The same name still written on the deed. The same name nobody had managed to erase. When I returned home, I found Kevin sitting alone on the porch. That surprised me. He stood as I approached. Can we talk? I sat. For a while he said nothing. Finally, I lost my job. I looked at him. When? Monday. The company had apparently discovered some financial issues related to accounts he managed. Nothing criminal, he explained. But enough to end his employment. Emily knows. He nodded. She's terrified. I believed him. For the first time, Kevin did not look ambitious. He looked defeated. I owe you an apology. I waited, a real one, enough to end his employment. Emily knows. He nodded. She's terrified. I believed him. For the first time, Kevin did not look ambitious. He looked defeated. I owe you an apology. I waited, a real one. He looked toward the street. I saw your house and thought I saw a solution. His voice cracked. I stopped seeing you. That honesty mattered. Perhaps not enough, but it mattered. I grew up poor, he said. I know. My parents lost everything. I listened. When I saw a paid-off house, I panicked. I nodded slowly, and then I started convincing myself it was for everyone. He looked directly at me, but it was mostly for me. The sun was beginning to set. The maple tree cast long shadows across the yard. For several minutes, we sat quietly. Finally, Kevin said, "We'll leave." The words surprised me. "When?" "As soon as we can." I looked at him. "Do you want to?" He answered honestly. "No." "Then why?" "Because I think you need your house back." My eyes moved toward the mailbox. The Carter name still sat there. Kevin followed my gaze. Without another word, he stood. He walked to the garage. A few minutes later, he returned carrying a screwdriver. I remained seated. Slowly, carefully, he removed the metal letters. The Carter name came down one piece at a time. Emily appeared in the doorway. Ava beside her. Nobody spoke. When the last screw came free, Kevin walked toward me. He handed me the old Bennett nameplate he had found inside the garage. My fingers trembled. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Together, he and Ava attached it back to the mailbox. Grace Bennett. The name stood there again, exactly where it belonged. And for the first time since my daughter arrived, I looked at my home and saw not what I had nearly lost, but what had finally returned. The week after the mailbox changed back, the house finally began to breathe again. Not all at once. Healing never arrives the way storms do. It comes quietly. A window opens. A chair moves back where it belongs. Someone says thank you after forgetting how. Little things. The first morning after Kevin restored my name, I stepped onto the porch before sunrise. The air smelled of wet grass. The maple tree stood still against the pale sky. And there beside the road my name had returned. Grace Bennett. Simple. Ordinary. Mine. I touched the metal plate with my fingers. For months, I had believed the mailbox represented ownership. Now I understood that it represented something much deeper. Recognition. Someone can live inside your house and still erase you. Someone can share your blood and still stop seeing you. But the moment your own name disappears, you realize how desperately human beings need to be acknowledged. I stood there a long time. When I turned back toward the house, I saw Emily watching from the kitchen window. She did not wave. She simply stood there, and for the first time in many months, she looked like a daughter instead of an opponent. Later that morning, Kevin packed several boxes. Not everything, just enough to make his intentions clear. I found him in the garage sorting tools. Some belonged to him. Most belonged to Robert. He held one of Robert's old socket wrenches in his hand. "I almost took this," he admitted. I leaned against the doorway. "But you didn't." "No." He placed it carefully back inside the toolbox. I've spent my entire life being afraid of losing things. His voice sounded tired. My father lost his business. I listened. My mother lost our house. He closed the toolbox. We moved 3 times before I graduated high school. The garage smelled of motor oil and old wood. I promised myself my family would never experience that. I nodded, and then I became exactly the kind of man I hated. The honesty surprised me. Perhaps disaster had finally stripped away his ambition. Perhaps losing everything had made him see what he had almost taken. "Kevin," I said quietly, "fear makes people do strange things." He looked at me. "But fear does not excuse them." "No." He lowered his eyes. "It doesn't." That afternoon, Emily asked me to walk with her, just the 2 of us. We walked through the neighborhood where she had learned to ride a bicycle, past the Johnson house, past the small church, past the park where Robert once coached Little League. The leaves moved softly overhead. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Emily said,
I don't know how to fix this.
I looked ahead. Neither do I. She laughed sadly.
At least we agree on something.
We continued walking. Finally, she stopped beside the old playground.
I've been angry for years.
I turned toward her.
At me.
Yes. Why? Her eyes filled.
Because after Dad died, you survived. I had not expected that answer.
She looked toward the swings.
I didn't.
A tear slipped down her cheek.
I came home after the funeral and the house looked exactly the same.
I nodded.
You cooked the same dinners.
Yes.
You sat in Dad's chair.
Yes.
You planted flowers. I waited, and I couldn't understand how. My own eyes began to burn. Emily. I cried every day. I know now.
No, sweetheart.
You don't.
The word surprised both of us.
I cried in the shower.
She looked at me.
I cried in the grocery store.
Tears rolled down my face.
I cried folding your father's shirts.
She began crying too.
I simply did it privately.
She covered her mouth.
I thought you were stronger than me.
I shook my head.
No.
Then why did you survive?
I looked toward the sky, because the answer had taken me years to learn.
Because your father died.
She stared at me.
And I didn't.
The playground stood empty around us.
When someone you love dies, you can either follow them into grief or carry them forward. My voice trembled.
I chose to carry him.
She cried openly now.
I thought the house was keeping you stuck.
I touched her hand.
The house was helping me stay. For several minutes, we simply stood there. 2 women, one grieving a husband, one grieving a father, both making mistakes, both hurting differently. Finally, Emily whispered, "I'm sorry I stopped seeing you." That sentence mattered more than all the others, because the real wound had never been the house. It had been invisibility. Back home, Ava was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks. "Finals are over," she announced. "How did you do?" She smiled. "I think okay." She looked lighter.
Teenagers notice tension even when adults believe they hide it. For months, she had carried fear between her parents and her grandmother. Now, for the first time, she laughed again. That evening, she asked me something unexpected.
"Grandma?"
"Yes. Can you teach me to sew?" The room became quiet. My sewing room. The room Emily had wanted to turn into an office. The room that had nearly disappeared.
I smiled. Of course. We spent 2 hours upstairs. The machine still worked perfectly. The old basket still held buttons. The unfinished quilt still rested inside the cedar chest. Ava ran her fingers across the fabric. "You were making this for Grandpa?" "Yes." "Why didn't you finish?" I looked at the folded pieces. "Because I thought finishing it meant saying goodbye." She considered that. Maybe it means saying hello. The wisdom of young people often arrives quietly. I looked at her. "Would you help me?" Her face lit up. Yes. Together, we threaded needles, cut fabric, matched colors. For the first time in years, the sewing room felt alive again. Downstairs, Emily watched from the doorway. She smiled. Not because she owned the room, not because she had changed it, but because she finally understood why it existed. Later that night, there was another conversation. Kevin and Emily sat across from me in the living room. No folders, no papers, no consultants. Only honesty.
"We found an apartment," Kevin said.
My heart tightened. "When next month?" Emily looked nervous. "We wanted to tell you ourselves." I nodded. A strange sadness filled me. For months, I had wanted them to leave. Now that they were going, I realized something painful. I had never wanted my family gone. I had only wanted myself to remain. "Will you be all right?" I asked. Kevin answered honestly. "I don't know." Emily squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out." That answer felt different. Not because it promised success, because it accepted responsibility. No one mentioned the house. No one mentioned money. No one mentioned ownership. At bedtime, I walked through every room. The kitchen, the dining room, the hallway, Robert's chair, the mantel, the sewing room, the front porch, the mailbox. Everything looked almost exactly as it had before Emily arrived, and yet nothing was the same. Because now I understood something important. A house can survive strangers. A house can survive storms. A house can survive grief. But the people inside it must decide whether love means possession or protection. For months, my daughter believed my home could save her. Now, she was finally learning that only honesty could do that. Before going to bed, I took Robert's letter from my purse one final time. I read the last sentence again. "Do not disappear for them." I smiled softly, because I had not. And because of that, perhaps my daughter had finally stopped disappearing too. Life teaches us many things, but perhaps one of the hardest lessons is this: love does not require surrender. Parents spend years sacrificing for their children. We give our time, our energy, our dreams, and sometimes even pieces of ourselves. But growing older does not mean our needs disappear. Our memories still matter. Our dignity still matters. Our names still matter. Sometimes people we love become frightened. Fear about money, fear about the future, fear about losing security. Fear can make good people make terrible choices. It can turn concern into control and love into entitlement. But boundaries are not cruelty. Protecting yourself is not selfishness, and saying no does not mean you love your family less. A home is not valuable because of its market price. It is valuable because it holds the evidence of a life. The laughter, the grief, the birthdays, the losses, the people who sat around the kitchen table and promised to stay. Forgiveness is possible. Healing is possible. Families can rebuild, but only when truth enters the room. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts below. Have you ever felt invisible inside your own family? Have you ever had to protect yourself from someone you loved? Please tell me where you are watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. I read every comment because your stories matter too. And if this journey meant something to you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us again for another story about family courage and finding your voice. You are never too old to protect your peace. You are never too old to begin again.